As if it Moonstone Island is a bit like Harvest Moon Rune Factory meets Pokemon with a little bit of a deck builder twist. Wait, sorry, can't say that. Nintendo's definitely going to send assassins to my location if I do. So instead, let me say that Moonstone Island is a little bit like the creature collecting from Temtem, crossed with the deck building from something like Slave Aspire, all set in a game somewhat similar to Stardew Valley. There we go. Now that we've avoided the big N assassins, let's get into a few more things, because the game has a lot of systems to explore. But it is very much a cozy game, which means it takes a low-pressure approach. It's really hard to fail. You don't get game over screens. And it's really easy to do everything when you want to without feeling super pressured into doing a specific thing at a specific time, or getting bogged down trying to cross everything off the map because you're presented with a map full of markers. Originally, I was going to review this after one in-game year, basically completing the main quest. This is the task I set out for myself when starting Moonstone Island, and this is also the task that I failed successfully, because before I knew it, days turned into weeks, seasons turned into a year, and I still had way more stuff that I wanted to do. Now, before I get into my review, a quick reminder that if you want to see more content like this, do be sure to get subscribed and leave a like while you're down there. And so, here are my thoughts on Moonstone Island after about 60 hours played. At the start of a game, you're a new alchemist, leaving home to start your training and explore the world of Moonstone. At least I think it's called that. I don't remember the world's name, which I probably should after playing the game for 60 hours. But you don't exactly get off to a smooth start. In fact, while heading to Moonstone Island, you crash land, break your broom, lose all your stuff, then spend the night wandering around until at 2 a.m. you pass out, and you are carried to the inn and put safely in bed by the innkeeper Osno and her bartender Quill. Of course, this would have been the perfect time for an enterprising fellow of ill repute to come along and, while you're asleep, steal all of your stuff. No one would be the wiser, and they could easily escape. Luckily, the folks on Moonstone Island are far kinder than that, and so no one did. Instead, you wake up cozy in a bed with all of your stuff returned minus the broom, which is unfortunately damaged beyond repair. Don't worry, you'll be able to make another one later. At the start of the game, the world seems quite vast, and there's a lot to explore given your limited tools. At first, your only ways to transit between islands is either building pathways to bridge the gap, which takes a lot of resources and quite a bit of time, floating between them on a balloon, which also takes quite a bit of time and you're somewhat left to drift among the winds, or using a teleporter found on an island to teleport to a random place. In some cases, that can be a very dangerous hostile environment. But with a bit of studious Moonstone collection, you'll soon have access to that broomstick back, at which point the world really does start to open up. The inner islands are quite safe, but the outer islands have both high-level spirits and a lot of dangerous hazards. On Poison Islands, you need to avoid toxic clouds, which is honestly pretty easy, though there's not too much of a threat here. On Lightning Islands, your bar slowly fills, and at the end, they zap you, decreasing your energy, and if all your energy gets depleted, you get knocked out for the day. On Fire Islands, you take constant ticking damage, which depletes your energy much faster than Lightning Islands. And last up, the most dangerous, found only in one specific part of the map, are the Dark Islands, that do even more severe ticking damage and have very dangerous spirits. But as an alchemist, you have a variety of tools to deal with this hostile environment. You can raise spirits of your own, to battle and tame the ones found on the islands. You can craft potions to provide resistances from elemental hazards, or even absorb them entirely, restoring your energy. And you can carry charms that render yourself immune to these negative effects. You won't get all of these things at once, but over time, as you keep playing, different ways to deal with all the hazards will unlock. You also have 4 distinct seasons to explore: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Each has a unique color scheme. After all, in spring, everything's green and vibrant, whereas in fall, everything's dull and orange. Many of the plants that grow within a season also reflect this, so spring crops grow very quickly, but fall crops grow more slowly and can continually be reharvested. Winter's also quite unique because there are some spirits that are only available during the winter, and also the ground's frozen, so you won't be doing any planting, at least outside of your greenhouse. Now later on, you can also craft a glider. When you do this, along with gaining some maximum energy, you're able to far more quickly and efficiently move between the islands, making the world that was once vast and mysterious feel a lot smaller and somewhat more familiar. Now while you're exploring, there are a few things to keep an eye out for. First up, Moonstone. This will be bright and glowy at night, but sometimes when you cut down grass or just see it lying around, pick up the blue stones as you'll need a lot of them later. Also, there are wild spirits. You can fight them, defeating them gets EXP for your spirits, or you can tame them, adding to your collection. There are also dungeons to explore. These have a little bit of a puzzle element, some combat, a bunch of treasure chests to loot, and end in a boss fight. There are treasure maps to collect and follow, if you're willing. And if you want to break some rocks, there are even mines to explore. They have some creatures, treasure chests, and of course, lots and lots of ore. Oh, and also make sure you have a scythe handy so you can cut down some plants and gain some seeds. Not only will the botanist Ophelia want them, but they're very useful if you want to grow some crops and make some money, or enhance your spirits, as pretty much every crop can not only be used as a material, but it can also be fed to spirits directly to heal them, increase their stats, or maybe even debuff/tame wild spirits. And if you're really lucky while exploring, you'll even encounter an island engulfed in a psychic storm. This only spawns at night, and it only happens to one island every night. But if you do, you can catch some really unique spirits and gain some unique plants, many of which are the most powerful options available in the game. Now, as a cozy farming game, there is of course farming in Moonstone Island. And as you go around to each of the different islands, you're able to collect different plants and their seeds, and then come home, or make your home on one of the outer islands and start planting them. You can harvest things by hand pretty easily, but very often you will want to use a sickle to harvest additional seeds, ensuring that you have a crop a few days later. You can also use a variety of fertilizers, purchased at a general store, to enhance your crops or make them grow faster. Some seeds are planted in the water, but for most you're going to need to till the land. After you do, place down the seed, throw in the fertilizer if you want, and then make sure to water your crop every day so it grows. Or, count on Mother Nature to do it for you, and after you spend a little time exploring a mine, you can craft sprinklers to do it automatically. I found that sprinklers were very, very accessible, so even within my first couple days, I really wasn't doing very much manual watering. Also, it is important to note that seeds only grow within season outside of your greenhouse. So, harvest your fall crops before winter, or else they're going to wither on the vine. And after you bring in that bountiful harvest, well, it's time to use your crops by either feeding them to spirits in combat, brewing them into potions, creating concoctions, taking the effects of 2 different crops and mixing them together, or cooking them into delectable dishes. Oh, and you can also sell them for profit, because after all, you're going to need money for a lot of upgrades like a better pickaxe, a bigger house, and maybe even a spirit bar. Which seems like a good time to talk about spirit taming. Now, the Alchemist Guild warns you against building a spirit army to overthrow the government. But where's the fun in following those rules? So you should absolutely be a rebel and build that spirit army. Combat takes the form of a card battler. Each of your spirits contributes cards to a shared deck. Their stats amplify the card effects. So if you have a spirit with high power, it's good at inflicting damage. If you have a spirit with high speed, it's good at using bash to break enemy armor. Every turn, much like Slave Aspire, you start with 3 energy to play your cards with, and they have various costs. Though one thing I do like about Psychic-type cards is they have a lot of ways to increase your energy gain and draw extra cards, making it a great support or even your main damage dealer. Well, overall, I'd say combat is pretty simple. There are a couple things that do make it feel really, really good. The first is how the game handles elemental weaknesses. So, each spirit is weak to 2 different elements. One will be based on their type, the standard rock, paper, scissors, water counters, fire stuff, but then the other is rolled at random. Spirits take 1.5 times the damage from the type they're weak to, and lose 1 armor whenever they're hit with the damage type. When a spirit loses all of its armor, it's stunned for a round and takes additional damage from all sources. So, you can use this to your advantage to interrupt enemy spirits, breaking their armor and then unleashing massive damage. But also, this can mean that enemy spirits are particularly dangerous to your team comp. After all, you could either spread your weaknesses out, thus having at least one spirit that's probably weak to everything but very little overlap, or you could pick one type of spirit that you aren't too worried about fighting. Let's just say you don't think you're going to encounter very many dangerous water types, and make sure to stack a whole bunch of spirits, all of which are weak to water, thus meaning the odds of them not being weak to an enemy spirit is much, much higher. The second thing that I liked is just how much opportunity you, as the player or as the alchemist, has to interfere with the hostile spirits. Basically, every crop has some effect when fed to a spirit. You could do something like tame a wild spirit, heal your spirit back up to full health, increase your spirit's armor, debuff a hostile spirit's vitality, meaning its health goes down, lower speed, raise power, all sorts of fun things. And again, even brew concoctions for even more disruptive effects. So, despite the combat being simple enough that I think anyone will be able to get into it, and the fact that, yes, each spirit has a unique effect, and yes, the elements do something a little bit different, I never felt like I had to have the best possible spirits or optimize everything. I just kind of went with spirits I thought were cool, and it worked out. There's still enough tactical depth that I was thinking about what I was doing, and I was like, damn, I should have played that round differently. And I even lost a couple fights because of it. There's quite a bit of combat out in the open world. But in addition to that, Moonstone Island has 30 dungeons for you to explore. Each of these has fairly simple puzzles, and a lot of treasure chests full of loot. So early game, these are really, really good, provided you're able to handle the fights. Also, each dungeon ends in a boss fight. It's a big old golem. I have to say, I would have preferred a little bit more diversity here. On the one hand, yes, the golems do use different elemental movesets, but on the other hand, it's still just a golem and it still gains armor every turn. Would have been nice to have a couple other bosses, though those are sadly restricted to the temples. But if you beat the dungeon boss, you get access to the Ando tree and you permanently increase your energy. Think of this as the stamina bar that you deplete by completing actions throughout the day. I found that at first, I had to be a little bit careful not to deplete my energy and even use some food or some plants to restore it. Later on, it wasn't really too much of an issue. Occasionally I would run low, but I had so much stuff to restore energy that at that point it didn't really matter. But fighting with your first spirit only goes so far, so eventually you're going to want to tame other wild spirits, preferably sooner rather than later. As you progress, there's also going to be quests to pair each of the villagers with a spirit. Sometimes this is going to be really easy where a villager just says, I want this specific spirit. Sometimes it's going to be hard if they give you vague clues, and sometimes they're going to let you decide. And so you can pick whatever you think fits them best. After you've tamed a few spirits, also make sure to put some of them in your spirit barn. In exchange for keeping them warm, safe, and well-fed, they give you a variety of unique materials and may even provide the occasional spirit egg. Here's the question. When it comes to spirits, can you tame them all? I'll leave that for you to answer throughout your own gameplay. Now normally, relationships are my least favorite part of games like this. It's just so tedious to keep up with the gifts and the birthdays, and everyone gets sad if you don't talk to them constantly. And especially when the characters themselves don't interest me, I just can't bring myself to care. But I found Moonstone Island to be pretty chill. I just talked to villagers when I happened to encounter them, and I gave them the occasional gift if I thought I had something suitable. And I found, just by doing this, it didn't feel like I had to go out of my way to make people happy. Also, it's not like there's any sort of progression or unlock that's really reliant on you making a certain friendship level with a specific villager. The unlocks come from things like quests and time progression. And after a while, I even started asking them out on dates. The first character I asked out was Farah, the upbeat, albeit a bit immature town blacksmith. And after that, I asked several of the other characters out as well, as a way to get to know them better, because I found that the friendship meter built way faster from going on dates and actually just talking to them and, not being an asshole on the date, than it did by giving gifts, which I really liked. And hey, if someone declines, no worries, you can always just try again on a different day. Ultimately, I decided to not only fully date, but also marry Osino the Tavern Keeper. But if her personality isn't for you, there's plenty of other characters to fall in love with. The shy Cleo, the nerdy Zed, the cold as ice Gianna, who's actually a tsundere, the carefree and upbeat Tobin, the kind Ophelia, and of course, the mysterious Waldo. Though you might want to help him get his memories back first. In short, I'd say the game does a good job of not only making the dating and relationships feel rewarding, but also making sure there's a little bit of something for everyone. Now, in addition to all of the major game systems, there are quite a few side activities. For example, you're an alchemist, so you can do alchemy. This means combining crops into concoctions or brewing potions to aid your exploration. Early game, I used quite a few of these, relatively early anyway, after I first unlocked them. Late game, I didn't find myself using them very much because my crops were just so strong, but I didn't feel like I needed the concoctions. And when it came to potions, I already had charms, which were pretty much the same thing, but permanent. Alternatively, you can cook various dishes. Some of these are fully known when you discover them, but others have mystery ingredients. We need to follow clues in the recipe and piece things together in hopes of making something edible. Since many dishes provide permanent one-time bonuses to your spirits, it's well worth experimenting with this on a rainy day and cooking a full meal for each of the spirits that you plan to use to vastly enhance their stats. And of course, what indie game would be complete without fishing? Cast out your line, then when something bites, reel it in. Simple enough. Oh, and also make sure your motion sensor bar is tilted just the right way on your TV so that your Wiimote can— wait, sorry, nope, that was fishing in Okami, I got a little bit distracted. In this case, you just have to move the cursor around to keep it on the fish. Pretty darn simple, and it works quite effectively. Now, to be honest with you, I often find fishing in games to be pretty boring, but here I found it a good way to break up the blocks of time. Especially when there's a day that I wasn't really doing anything, but I had a date that I wanted to get to, so I didn't want to go out exploring and risk losing track of time or getting knocked out. So instead, I'd just sit there, fish, catch some stuff, maybe go to a nearby island and fish there, and make it back to my date in no time. In fact, I even did this so much that I fully completed the mythical fishing quest and got almost every fish as Moonstone. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. You're addicted to fishing. It's not me. But hey, at least I made a lot of money doing it. As they say, always monetize your addictions. Now last up, how did progression feel? Well, most of your progression in Moonstone Island comes from completing quests and the advancement of seasons, with a few being from things like exploring dungeons and temples. This unlocks new alchemical tools, which notably, you get one new tool for each temple, and you also get a few from the story/seasons/quests. So at first, spring of year 1, you feel pretty limited. But if you've done a good bit of exploration, dungeoning, and templing, by the end of winter year 1, you pretty much have all the progression you're going to get. In addition to this, as you interact with the world, participate in combat, harvest crops, interact with villagers, you gain experience for various skills. I found that these bonuses were nice, a few of them were super impactful, but most of them didn't really feel all that necessary, so with just a few points, I felt like I got a bulk of the bonuses, but then every once in a while I'd get something nice as a surprise when I happened to spend more time, say, fishing. In short, Moonstone Island has a lot to do. At the start of the game, there's a vast world to explore. There's a wealth of different island biomes, and each of these change with the seasons. You can gather plants, or grow plants, tame and battle against wild spirits, and dive into the dungeons as you explore the islands. But at the same time, I really like that the game doesn't pressure you into just checking off markers. For example, the game has 30 dungeons, but you only need to complete 15 of them, and I think at about 60 hours in, I've only completed 17. There are a lot of islands, but you don't need to go to all of them, unless you want to. I like this approach, because very often when I see a map full of markers, I go, I can't wait to do all this. And then halfway through I'm like, I can't wait to be done doing all this, because I'm just checking things off the list, and I'm bored out of my mind. And I like the combat, but I also recognize that there's a lot of people who are going to be playing a game like this who really aren't in it for the combat, and you can spend quite a bit of time not engaging with combat or pretty much just dealing with it on a surface level and be totally fine. Whereas for me, I enjoyed casually interacting with the residents of Moonstone Island, not getting too deep into that system. When I first played the Moonstone Island demo, I kind of got the feeling that it wasn't going to flesh out any of its systems to be better than the games that inspired it. That is to say, it's not going to be a better farming simulator than Stardew Valley. It's not going to be a better deck builder than Slave Aspire. But what it does do really well is blending all of the genres together to make something that feels really unique. And also, to mean there's such a variety of content that you don't get bored of doing the same thing over and over and over again. This is how, even though I plan to only spend 1 year in game, before I knew it, I was 60 hours deep and still tempted to go back to the title right now. Maybe that's just because I'm exposing myself to more of it by writing all these notes and doing this review. In short, if you like cozy games, creature collectors, or deck builders, especially if you like all three, I can definitely recommend Moonstone Island. The game costs $20 and has a good bit of replay value. Now, over on OpenCritic, Moonstone Island has a strong 81 with 69% of critics recommending. and on Steam, it has a very positive at around 85%. So overall, I'd say it's a pretty well-liked game, and that certainly tracks with my own experiences as someone who has liked some games in the cozy genre, but isn't necessarily an aficionado. I wouldn't say I really have any major complaints about the game, though in terms of minor complaints, the number one thing would be that as much content as it has, it's wide as an ocean and deep as a puddle. There's very little depth to most of the systems, which means that you only need to engage with them at a surface level, and I would have liked a few more options to engage with things a little bit more deeply, such as maybe breeding my own spirits or hybridizing crops together to get different effects rather than just putting on a fertilizer that enhances what the crop already has. But hey, maybe that's going to come in a future DLC, and even if not, the game's pretty darn good as it is. With that said, if you want to see my thoughts on some other maybe related games, you can either check out my review of Moonlighter, a kind of hybrid cozy shop sim / dungeon crawler game, or maybe check out Temtem Swarm, a vampire survivor-like game where I made a first impressions video. Both of those will be up in the card and down below. I kind of went back and forth on if I should score this one or not, but I realized I haven't played all that many cozy games, and I don't really have a good point of comparison to say, is Moonstone Island good in the genre? But I can very much say that I liked it. And so I left with a recommendation and kept the review unscored. Though in the future I'm certainly going to use this as a touchstone when I'm recommending or maybe even scoring other cozy games in the future. And so with that, thanks for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.